and welcome to another World of UX podcast. This is your host, Darren Hood. Thanks for taking the time to join us on today. Welcome all of you joining us for the first time. It's time to share the second part of my session with Yan Vishnepolsky from last week, where we were talking about a lot of things associated with artificial intelligence and just talking about UX in general to a great extent as well, but a very, really dynamic and energetic segment. And so, ready? Here comes part two, everybody. Don't run from AI. Please don't think that when I've said things about AI in the past and I'm anti-AI, I'm not. I welcome any tool that's here, but I do encourage people to be engaged in critical thinking. Don't embrace things blindly. That's not going to end well. You can't embrace anything blindly and have that end well. that just doesn't fly.
Blather generator. That ultimately, like, if you think of it as a blather generator, you'll have a much more accurate point of view of what it does than the term AI. Mm-hmm. Replace the term AI with blather generator, and you have an accurate perception of what AI is and will be for the foreseeable future. And so blather generator is a lot less scary than artificial intelligence. And I hope that will make our listeners feel better today.
Great point. Great point. We have come to the segment of the show where we get into our free for all or random segment, and we've got three topics that we want to engage in here. We're going to leave AI. AI might come up again, it may not, but we're just talking in general, just about UX as a whole today. Yes. So, three things. We were talking before we started the recording, and we were just talking about crazy interviews we've had.
Oh yeah.
Over the years. So let's get into this for a minute. People always ask me, Darren, I want to hear about your nightmares. Probably I don't want to call it strange. Of course, don't want to even indirectly insult anybody, but I do find it interesting that people want to hear about nightmares. Well, that's where this crazy interviews thing comes into play. There are too many people with rose-colored glasses on. As somebody who I do take, I'm honored to serve as a caretaker of the discipline, and that means that I'm gonna say some things that are gonna make people uncomfortable. But the same people that get made uncomfortable, and somebody I mentioned last week, somebody told me they asked me for a portfolio review once, and I declined. And the person said that was one of the best things that ever happened to me when Darren declined that request, and it made me a better UXer. People would never think that would come out of such a thing, but I recognize it. And I knew that wasn't what he needed. And that person is sharp as a tack to this day. Awesome. But so I'm not a coddler. I speak about that. I'm trying to forewarn, but all of this is prefacing because I don't know how ugly this is about to get. So I want to make sure, that people understand why we do. Yeah, we got to. I'd rather talk about ugly than come face to face with ugly.
Yes.
I'd rather talk about flat tires than experience one. And so that's what this is about. We're trying to help those of you out there, you're adults. We're going to talk to you like you're adults. So that means that we're going to talk about the hard stuff in hopes that when you do encounter it, and you will, that it makes it easier for you to manage it. So that's it. Let's get into some of this stuff. You go start us off, Yan. What crazy interview memory comes to mind for you? We might do 2 or 3 here.
So I think it's important to preface, coming back to my earlier career, I spent the first 7 years of my career running my own agency, so I didn't have to take interviews. So when I left my agency, I had to learn interview skills from scratch because I all of a sudden was taking interviews for the first time in forever since I started my career in India. And so everything was new and it was just like an overload of information. I learned about the STAR method, and portfolios and all of that. But it was also interesting because I had taken interviews. People had come to me and I had interviewed them. I just had never been on the other side of the desk. And so it was all just I think that perspective is important to understand as I talk about my interview experience because it's unusual to say the least, I think. And so there's that. And when I interviewed, I feel like in some companies, there's, like I mentioned earlier, we talked about on the show, Darren, how like UX is everywhere, and you can be human centered in the interview process itself. The best interviews are, and the worst interviews, frankly, are not.
Mm-hmm.
When people schedule back-to-back interviews, not understanding the cognitive load that takes of a person to go through an interview and then to jump into another one and then to jump into a third. And then in my case, I've had situations where I had to jump into 4 back-to-back interviews. Now I understood because like I was like, okay, that's their team. They probably have are backed up and they have a lot of things to do. But I wish that they had the same kind of empathy for the candidates as well. Like I had empathy for them. It should, the best process is like a empathy two-way street where they understand, okay, he understands that we are overloaded. We need to understand that this is going to be too much to go through all at once, back to back, and we need to give him time to deload. Now, there's also the fact that I'm neurodivergent. That's another aspect of this. And for neurodivergent folks, it's not really all that diversity friendly to put them through 4 back-to-back interviews. And so one of the things that I learned from that experience, because I tried to put the impetus on me, is that nowadays, when if that ever happens again, I let them know that, like, listen, I'm neurodivergent. This is going to be too much for me to do.
Yeah.
I also do that when I'm not a big fan of these standardized cognitive tests, and especially for someone with about 15 years of experience.
Yep.
That's usually a red flag for me. I've had those come up. It depends on the bad job market, how bad the job market is, and I'm never going to tell someone to not take an interview.
Right.
But because who knows what your situation is as an individual. But I would be deeply concerned if you have years of experience and you've been asked to take a cognitive test. That's concerning for me, and particularly because for neurodivergent folks, what are you measuring? What are you, like if you're measuring neurotypical folks, I could understand if they're neurodivergent folks did not exist in this universe, but we do, and we're a significant portion of the tech population. Some estimates say that about as much as half of the tech community is neurodivergent, half. And so if you're not considering that as you're doing these tests, what is the good of these tests in the first place?
Yep.
And so now, before I take a test, I'll take if I'm in a bad job situation like I am now and been unemployed for a year, I will still take that test. But what I do now is I say, listen, I'm neurodivergent. You might not be measuring what you think you're measuring when you're measuring me with this test.
Bingo. And it happens so much.
Yes.
It happens so much that people are being measured the wrong way.
Yes. Psychometric tests are like dubious, of dubious worth in the job market.
And then evaluating a candidate side by side based on unfair criteria, which is why I just recently on the podcast talked about the incivility, the inequitability, and the dysfunctional nature of the job seeking process, because there are things that are happening that people simply are not considering.
Yep.
And then you're going to find out 8 months later that you hired the wrong person.
Absolutely.
And one of the other things, I got to throw this little plug in, and we're going to be talking about this on an upcoming episode, is that there's this thing. I was talking to Tony Mora recently. Shout out for Tony Mora, who does a lot of great stuff for the community. And Tony was talking about domain knowledge. And man, I just light bulbed in that moment. And that's where a lot of more seasoned practitioners are not getting interviews, let alone getting jobs today. Yes. Are not even getting the interviews. And when you bring in, I did a talk a few years ago for Tony Moore. He had a conference that was directed solely at UX recruiters. Yep. And I did a talk called Square Pegs and Round Holes.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Yep. And I talked about when you bring a person to the team, what is your team going to look like? Mm-hmm. Are you actually calculating this? and so what is the domain knowledge of the team now? Yep. You've got 5 finalists. What will the domain knowledge of the team look like with each one of those people? If the domain knowledge of the team, if the needle does not move, If it does not expand, what in the world are you doing? Because if the domain knowledge of the team doesn't expand, there are ROI factors that are associated with that. How much potential impact does your team have if the domain knowledge does not expand? None. How much does your UX maturity grow? If the domain knowledge doesn't grow, none. Matter of fact, you can end up at a worse deficit. And really sad stuff. So domain knowledge is this thing. It's not being valued in UX circles, mostly by people who think that all we do is make things look pretty. And so, I mean, this is really something. And as a person, 15 years for you, 28 years in my book. I know somebody else, 30 years, someone else, 25 years, 20. These are people I know that right now are struggling to find a job. And they automatically vault any team they're brought into forward. It doesn't make sense. They're not being considered.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. And the problem is like that we bring accountability. And so like when you hire someone that actually knows what they're doing and has been around the block like we have, if you're is not doing well, that there's a certain fear factor that we're going to shine the light onto some in dark corners, turn over some rocks, and there's a fear that's associated with that. Yeah. But this is like if you're one of those people that's afraid and you're listening to the show, like if you hire someone like us, like we know how to do this. Like we've been around the block. We've worked many jobs before. You don't have to be afraid of us. We're here to help you. By sticking your hand in the sand, you're not helping yourself. Yep, you're hurting yourself. It's in your self-interest to shine a light under the rocks. Let us help you do that, and if we can work together to fix your issues. And if you try to bury them, they're not going anywhere. So yes, let's work together.
Amazing stuff. We're going to shift into the second subtopic in our random component today, because it speaks to this. Good segue time. The state of UX today. What are your thoughts on? You notice I'm steering clear. We're just going to hear Jan's thoughts for the most part here on this. What are your thoughts on the state of UX today?
So I'm going to take a very sort of populist perspective to this question, because I'm one of the unemployed. But I feel like that's going to fit in very well with the tone of World of UX and Darren, because I know that Darren keeps it real. And so, and so basically, I think that UX is frankly in a bad state. I think, but I don't think. I feel like there's an issue in that we're in a social media bubble. We're in a bubble of our own circles, and it's tempting that because we often associate with other UX professionals, that we think that this problem is isolated to UX. And so, like, I remember hearing many times on LinkedIn and other places that UX is the problem, and I agree that UX certainly has serious issues. But there's an issue with research called conflating factors, and conflating factors means just because UX has issues doesn't mean that those issues are what's causing what's going on today. Is it? Maybe, maybe not. But I do know that having networked with outside of our UX community to talk to product managers, that if you talk to product managers right now, they're going through the same kind of spiral that the UX community is going through, where they believe that product management is almost over, it's finished. There's never going to be like many. I'm not going to say all product managers believe this, but there's many product managers that believe that they're in a very bad state, that they got affected worse than everybody else. And if you talk to developers, there have been many developers that got laid off in this downturn. And so this is tech. It's not us. It's tech. And so here's my theory. I feel like what's really going on is stock. It's stock prices. That it is all driven by the stock market. And so when Elon Musk laid off people and the stock value did not drop immediately of Twitter or X, right? whatever we want to call it now, then if it did not immediately drop, then the shareholders thought, okay, well then maybe this is what should be going on with all companies. Of course, it's not going to be instantaneous, and we all know that Twitter is eroding as we speak. But that's for the people in the know. The people that don't know, it's a great success story. Lay off a whole bunch of people, save a whole bunch of money, increase the profits of and share prices, and so forth. And so that's what's, I feel like, if you go to the top, to the origins, it always starts with stocks and with shares, and if you look at it from that perspective, every industry has its ups and downs. COVID, we had a huge spike. So it's not like in any kind of economic situation, a spike is not going to keep going endlessly.
Right.
It's always a down and an up and a down and an up. And so now we're a little bit down, but things will come up eventually. But what can we do in this time, right? Like individuals, myself, listening to this podcast, we can learn from people like Darren, who have been around the block and have experienced this more than we can. We could use this time to educate ourselves, to get better at what's going on in the industry, to understand things more deeply, to pursue the things that we're passionate about and that we care about, and to make ourselves better, because who knows when we'll have another opportunity like this. When the market becomes good again, we're not going to have as much free time to study and to develop ourselves. And so this is your moment to and seize it.
That's awesome. Awesome take. Awesome take. Last topic. So we're in the home stretch. We were talking about the .com bust, and I ask you to share this story again, but you were talking, older people were talking about how that what's going on right now in, I'll say, the tech world at large, remind them of the .com bust. So go ahead and take the baton there and dive in. Yes. That's what I'm going to jump in on with you. I lived through that. So let's go ahead and dive in.
So I want to caveat that there's an element of hearsay. I have 15 years of experience. I do not have, like Darren, 28 years of experience like Darren has. I have 15 years of experience, which means, crucially, that I was not in this industry during the so that's an important caveat. I do have friends who are in most of my social circles in UX they're in their 40s and 50s, and they have lived through that .com bubble, and some of them have even lived through the one before, which was in the early 90s. And so what the takeaway that I'm hearing is that this is cyclical, and every once in a while, depending on who you ask, the figure will change 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, but there's always a downturn. What goes up must come down. And so like we had like a huge bubble due to COVID, and that was, some of it was systemic because we were all indoors and we had no choice but to use computers, humanity as a whole. And so because of that, we had an inflationary spike in the use of technological devices and in employment in UX and in tech in general. But in general, like the .com bubble, like, right, like there was another inflationary spike where people were talking about there were so many .com companies that were existing at that time. And again, what comes up must come down. It did, and it came down hard. And so my friends that were around during that time, they say that basically some say that it was worse, some say that it was about the same, but it reminds them this period that we're going through now with the .com bubble burst. I personally take some reassurance from that, the fact that this time is not unique, that this time is not special, and we came back from the .com bubble bust. We came back from 2008 and 9, 10. Like if you look, I encourage people in general. Like I'm a huge nerd. I love reading about history. The history of business in itself is very interesting in and of itself. Like you look back, like there was a bubble around tulips. Tulips was a bubble that happened. There's so many different bubbles that happen, and this is just another one. And so we're gonna get through this, and hopefully soon. But sooner or later, things will go back to the way that we remember them, and just hang in there if you can.
Yep. So I'll piggyback on that. That's where I will jump in on this topic a little bit, and I forewarn Yan on this one a little bit. So I'm around when the .com bust happened in the late 90s. And everybody's rushing to get to the internet around 94, 95, 96. We're all lined up around the corner waiting to get our first 25 megabyte computers with our 14.4 baud modems and things of this nature with our AOL floppies. Some of folks don't even know what a floppy is. And we're doing all of this stuff. And everybody's, of course, there's this internet thing. You've got mail, and the whole 9 yards. Everybody's going through this whole cycle, and we're being introduced to this new platform, and we're doing all these internet things. And of course, all the companies are running to get on the internet. And when everybody's running to get on internet, the first wave of web designs was pretty much all brochureware. E-commerce was not a thing. At all. Nobody was going online to buy pretty much anything, but you did have to go online. It was like having a website was like having another salesperson you didn't have to pay. And everybody had these things, and brochureware was everywhere. Somebody was on the web, you basically go online and learn about what they had in products. Couldn't buy anything, but you could have a phone number. You could call them and you might be able to send an email, but that was pretty much how things were going. Part of how, in my opinion, and remembering how that all transpired was that, and this is where I see the parallels between 2000 to 2024 and 1997 to 2000. The parallels are that companies want to get on the internet, some stakeholder, some client that's excited, and they say, we need to get on the internet. And so they can't do it. So that means that they have to either have internal teams, or back then, a lot of times they were going to agencies, whether it was a big creative agency or a smaller freelance agency or whatever. Let's go and get on the internet. And so the mindset behind designs, the content strategy, if you will, was driven by clients and stakeholders. It was not driven by professionals. And we didn't call it user experience until 10 years after that, almost. But it was mostly, everybody back then was mostly referred to as information architects, referred to as interaction designers. There was nobody, the only person called UX, that wasn't known. We didn't find out that Don Norman was called UX architect for another 10 years after he was even called that, if that, 10 to 12 years after in many cases. So that wasn't being used at all. Matter of fact, the early days of UX, people kept trying to refer to us as, wait for it, CX people. Mm-hmm. They tried customer experience. That didn't catch. They tried experience design, XD people. That didn't catch. But the issue of information architecture and interaction designer, that did. UCD, user centered designer, wasn't even catching. So, but the bottom line was designs were driven by people who knew nothing about design. Yeah. And remember, design is both art and science. There's an aesthetic component to it, and then there's the functional component to it. And the functional component is more built on the cognitive or the scientific aspect, the infinite scientific aspect of it, the cognitive load and all these other things, task flows and semiotics and all of that kind of stuff. And then it was, you put is it pretty? You do that later. But pretty was preeminent over functionality. So you had a lot of sites that after they did get out there with the brochureware, then they wanted what I call whiz bang pow. So everybody wanted something that was going to really stimulate people and that was going to look different. They were trying to be different and all this kind of stuff. And everybody back then was stuck in the world of print. So they thought that they could do what they were doing on print and take it to the web. And that it would be apples to apples. And they found out quickly. And that's what caused the .com bust, because everybody had a presence, but it didn't work. Findability was being ignored. Usability, for the most part, was being ignored. I always tell the story, and I share it with Yan before we started recording. I'll never forget the time I went to a website and it said something is loading. You have to wait for this to finish loading. So I sat there. I went and got something to drink, something to eat, came back, still loading. I waited 8 to 10 minutes for this thing to load. And when it loaded, it finally said it's loading. I'm like, okay, put my stuff down. Let's watch the screen. It's finished. Let's see what's going to happen. A dove flew across the screen. That's what I was waiting on. for 8 to 10 minutes. This is the kind of thing that was happening on a lot of sites. This was the age where we were being struck by, these killer, I like to jokingly call them the killer animated GIFs. There were animated GIFs everywhere and all types of things that were going on, but the user's needs and the user's mental models were being ignored. I like to think that it was what we now call UX that saved us from the .com bust. People started focusing. We need to make navigation intuitive. We need to understand what they're trying to. UX research started. The needs started to come up. People start to recognize this stuff more. If we want to succeed and we want to do better than our competition, we got to do a little bit more than put together something cute and throw it out here on the site. Now, fast forward to 2024. We're coming full circle. And the part of the reason I say this is because what happened in the .com bust is happening again. And what's happening again is people are bringing in folks to do the UX work while the UX has been under siege since 2011, where we saved people from the .com bust. At least I like to think so. And I think there's a lot of evidence to support that. But now, where you've had people trying to break into UX, what I call the posers, the upstarts and the retrofits, who don't really know the science of UX, have come in and pretty much we've been displaced by them. A lot of us who really know what we're doing get displaced. So we've actually, because of that, returned. Now you've got not only people who really don't know what they're doing, running UX teams, working on UX teams. I know somebody, I keep telling the story. I know somebody who works, I won't even say what type of company they work for, but he's surrounded by a bunch of 5, 6, 7 UX folks. I got to do air quotes, UX quotes, who are always, they work harder to get him fired than they do coming up with solutions for the work that they're doing because they're so threatened by him.
Yes.
They're so threatened by they don't realize, wow, he knows more than me. I can learn from him. She knows more than me. I can learn from her. Instead of looking at it that way, they see this person as a threat. For some reason, in their jacked up, dysfunctional wiring, the way to get better is to get rid of the person that's better than you. So you've got a lot of teams made up with that component, and it gets worse. Then you got the person running the team that doesn't know much more than the person they hire, which is why they keep surrounding himself with unqualified people. Again, not realizing that having the domain knowledge on the team drives the team forward. But what makes matters worse is flashing all the way back to 1996, 97. You've got clients, stakeholders who know nothing about design calling the shots on design.
Yeah.
We're right back where we were almost 20 years ago, where the people who don't understand, they'll come up, they'll show you 10 sites that they like. I like these 10 sites. Can we do this? You like it from an aesthetic perspective. They don't like it because they looked at it and evaluated the task flows like we would do. They don't look at it. Somebody told me once, let's do what they're doing on this site. And I looked at that site. We were doing a site for an academic resource. And I'm going, why are you trying to copy them? They've got 5 fonts on the page. You have no idea what people are trying to accomplish on the page. So nobody's examined the mental models. The people going to that institution are not, their mental models don't match the mental models of the people coming to your institution. But you want us to take something, you want us to Frankenstein together, because people don't get it. A leg from here and a foot from here and an arm from here and a finger from there, you end up with what we call a Frankenstein. But people who don't understand design don't know that. So we're back where we were, because this is happening in a lot of places where the people, and they want us to be order takers, which is why you see product designers popping up everywhere, because the average product designer is an order taker. The average product designer is a former visual designer. They're not UX people. They're not focusing on research the right way. To them, research is, I literally had somebody, this happened before. A person said, hey, which design do you like better, A or B? Oh, I like B. Okay, we're done. Literally said this. They asked one question. And they just asked them what they liked. And then they were acting like they were exhausted. And they threw themselves in the chair and they leaned back because they went through this with about 20 people. But they only asked one question. What do you like? That's not research.
No, it's not. And to listeners, if you're new to Darren's show, like, how do you tell that Darren knows what he's talking about? Because he was talked about this before it happened. The
Yep.
best science is predictive. If you listen to people and they can accurately predict what's going to happen before it happens, Darren was talking about this for years, and so he accurately predicted this exact situation. So he's someone that you want to keep listening.
And folks didn't want to listen to me. I told somebody recently, we were in a conversation about something, and I mentioned to somebody, I said, hey, I've got a history of saying something is happening or it's going to happen and people blowing me off.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it happens, because it's really sad that I have a lot of senior UX people, more seasoned people who do not support me, who are not interested in what I'm talking about, but none of them can disprove anything. They'll say, matter of fact, they'll attack me more than anything else. I've had people that have been connected with me for over a decade. The first time that they chimed in on anything that I've done on social media was to try to just cast shade. And
I'm just curious, like, what could someone argue against here? Are they arguing against the scientific method? Are they arguing against scientific thinking? Are they arguing in favor of defensive thinking? Like, what is so controversial about what you're saying? Like, it just seems reasonable. And furthermore, if you like let's take any one of the points that you mentioned in today's conversation. It's what's being taught in the top business schools. It's not even like focused in like UX anymore. Like, these concepts are like, hire people who are more talented than you. You go to Harvard Business School, they will say the same thing over there. You go to any Ivy League business school and get an MBA, they will tell you the same thing, to hire people who are better than you. That's the whole point of hiring people. Yep. And so, like, this is, I don't understand what is controversial here unless you don't understand the nature of business or you don't understand the nature of science. Either one of those is deeply concerning.
Yeah, you actually made me think about another nightmare scenario where I delivered a talk at Michigan State University. First time I ever delivered my heuristic talk. And it was called Heuristic, the Holy Grail of UX, and how we need to get back to it. There's too many people that don't understand heuristics. The people, I said, heuristics should be informing design. They should be very formative. If you use that, your initial designs are going to be better. If you use heuristics, you can actually make your research count, because with the exception of using your research to validate heuristics, for people who aren't familiar with it, it should allow you to focus more on things that you do need answers for, instead of things you should already know, wasting time, wasting money. So I do this talk, right? There's one guy at the talk, little digression and a little nightmare stuff. One guy is so mad, and he's mad more so because he wasn't asked to speak. He stands up, they give him the microphone, and he starts complaining because he couldn't read the text on the screen. And he did it on the next talk. It wasn't my talk, but it was the next talk where he did it. And I was done with my talk, and I said, wow, you could tell, because I tell people all the time, I've been counseling people for 40 years, so I pretty much read people pretty quickly. You could tell that some people complain, like the people who complain about the stuff that I'm talking about, they're actually voicing out about something else. They're not really voicing out about that. And they're the ones that introduce a straw man, because they lack the courage to address what really is on their mind. That's what I found in over 40 years of counseling people.
I've seen the same. Many people, particularly the most irate or upset people that you will encounter in your career, they're often like, it's never what they're talking about that's actually bothering you. You talk to them and you really try to understand them. Like, and unfortunately, that the onus becomes on us, like, because they're not being open, then we have to uncover it. But like, in such situations, we have to, like, if we really want to figure out what's going on, we have to dig deeper and talk to them and like use like all sorts of like therapy type of CBT kind of techniques to actually get to what is actually bothering them, because they're not addressing it and they're not speaking about it. But it's always clear to me, because like, it's usually the most upset and irate or whatever people who are behaving the most unusually or unprofessionally. Those are the ones that have this kind of thing going on.
Yep. And I knew that this guy, and it was funny because people started applauding. And I was sitting in the front. And as I tend to be very outspoken, I said, you're not supposed to be reading it. And people at the table heard me. And there's like 400 people there. The people in the front heard me, but nobody else heard me. And I said, you're not supposed to be reading the slides. You're supposed to be listening to the presenter. And everybody at the table with me they just start nodding their head. So that means that's a smoke screen.
Yes.
That's a smoke screen. That's not what he's upset about. And I found out he was actually upset because he wasn't asked to speak.
Wow.
He wasn't really upset. So it was a smoke screen that he was protesting the fact that he wasn't asked to be a part of this whole thing. So that was garbage. But that's only the beginning of the story. So somebody else who's there loved my talk on heuristics, goes back to their team. And this ties to the other part of the story. I'll connect the two dots. This person goes back, and this happened. This is 6-7 years ago that this happened, maybe. I don't remember exactly, but it was before the pandemic. So somewhere 2017, 2018, somewhere around in there. And the person says that they love the talk to the extent they went back to tell their teams about it. And I've told this story before. This person tells their team about the talk about the heuristics, and their team panics, protests. They want nothing to do. This is great. You should check out. Darren put the deck up on SlideShare. You should go get it. They start fighting and protesting. It's like when I did my talk on EQ for a big company. And the people start protesting, and when they heard my score, because we all did an assessment, EQ assessment on the spot with mind tools, and when they saw my score, there was a riot. The equivalent of a riot took place because their scores were terrible. And instead of realizing, wow, my score is terrible, when they heard my score, they began to try to like burn me at the stake. They did the equivalent of burning me at the stake on the spot. It's funny how people react, but at any rate, these people react to what this person said about the heuristics. Now, fast forward. Why did they protest that? Why would a UX person be upset about heuristics? Fast forward. 2 people who work at that same company. There's 3 parts of the story. 2 people, first 2 parts are these 2 people. Over the course of 45 days, chimed in on a post on social media to complain about something that was said. And really what it was, they've been protesting. There's somebody from that 4 parts, somebody from that company was on a panel with me at another event that I spoke at that ran back immediately to try to get me brought into that company. We need somebody that thinks like you to be that you will help vault our UX practice forward. We need to get you in here. I never made it in there. That's after the talk. So first there was a talk. That person went in. So we got to bring this in. I have multiple conversations with the recruiter. Wow. Never get anywhere. One person comes in and chimes in on my talk. The second person or my post. The second person, both of them protested. Neither of them said anything to me over a 10-year period of time. One person actually got their first big UX job they ever got in their life. They never so much as told me, thank you. I'm not complaining. I'm just citing facts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then the icing on the cake, I talked to somebody who was willing to share with me the stuff I did not have direct access to, who confirms with me, beside the person that told me that the team had basically the equivalent of a riot protesting the talk about the heuristics. This person said that my name came up multiple times with the leadership in that company, and they deliberately would not move forward. And it's because one of the reasons we have issues in UX today is folks don't want to bring in, I'm not the only one. So anybody that's thinking that, don't think that. People do not want to be accountable.
Yeah, accountability.
To people who know more. And that deals a blow to the team's practice when you don't. And I know myself, I know others that people absolutely will not hire because of they want to be the smartest person in the room. And when they bring you in, they won't be, and they don't like that.
There's 2 things to this. Number one is that, like I said earlier, this is what's being taught. What you're saying now is taught in the top business schools in the country. Like this is not just like unique to UX. Like if you any school that you go to will say hire someone who's more talented than you, because what's the point of hiring someone who's less talented than you? What are they going to bring to the organization that you don't already? You're wasting your money.
Yep.
And then the other thing is that when you actually take an effort to improve the maturity of your organization, to improve the way that your organization functions, and you are increasing the chances of your organization's success, you are increasing your own success.
Yep.
So, like, from a purely self-interested perspective, the smartest thing that you could do is to hire someone who's more talented than you. They're not going to replace you. They're not going to take your job. They're going to make it way more likely that you're going to keep your job.
Exactly.
And so this is it's good for everybody. And then on top of that, you have an opportunity to learn from them. So that way, and for the rest of your career, you can carry that knowledge forward with you, and that becomes really powerful. Knowledge is there's that aphorism, there's that expression, knowledge is power. It is. It absolutely is. That's what's great about user research. What's great about knowledge in general. Like, try to learn. Like, it's just so much is out there. The world is wonderful. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I know you're of the same mindset as me. We want to see the discipline go forward. I want to see the discipline go forward. I want to see people go forward. And frankly, there are a lot of people in the discipline, they're not interested in either. And so for that reason, then we have to make statements or talk about topics that are less comfortable than others. But if we don't talk about it, then we're complicit. Yes.
And the person that actually cares, like Darren, he cares because he actually says what's on his mind. The easiest thing would be for Darren and I and people like us to be like, yeah, it's fine. You're good. We'll sign off on what you're doing. We'll go along with it. And then we all go to hell in a handbasket together. It's to do. But we don't do it because we care. And you want people who care. You want people who care about your company. They want people who care about you. And that's what we bring to the table. We actually genuinely care because we're passionate about this subject.
Yes. So we fight. As we like to say metaphorically, we fight. We fight the good fight. And I tried to walk away from this fight. I couldn't.
Yeah, because it's part of us.
I couldn't. Yeah, and I'm like, I still take the weekends off on LinkedIn. But other than that, because people won't let me rest, Yan. I gotta
have to.
Yep. I got a message earlier today. Yeah, Darren. Somebody said, I got a question. I got an answer. And the answer is, I'll talk to you Monday. So I have to stop. I have to stop. I want to enjoy my coffee and talk to my wife and just take in a nice breeze. I don't want to talk about any of this stuff for a couple of days. A little bit. Let me rest. We'll be back at it. You'll be fine. You can wait till Monday. Nothing's going away. But this has been dynamite, Yan. This has been absolutely dynamite. And I know people are going to get a lot out of this. So thank you again for taking the time to join me on the show today. And we're going to go ahead and we're getting ready to sign off here. And Yan can give his parting comments, parting thoughts, and let us know where we can find him. Time for shameless plugs. Go for it.
Yeah, shameless plug number one, the show, because I want to put my wonderful team at Human-Centered AI first and center. We're all looking for work, by the way, but we have this wonderful podcast called Human-Centered AI, where we talk about UX and AI. You can find us on LinkedIn. I know it's an interesting choice, but LinkedIn is where we operate. We wanted to be closer to people and jobs that I believe most UX professionals are probably on LinkedIn. And so that's why we chose to host it there. So please come visit our page, Human-Centered AI, on LinkedIn. And we have episodes once every 2 weeks. They're live, but they're also recorded. We've been going for about a year. As for me, I'm currently looking for work. I've been out of work for about a year now, got affected by the layoffs. And so I'm very interested in a user research job at a senior or managerial level, equally interested in hands-on or managerial work.
So fantastic.
Thank you for listening to Darren's amazing show, World of UX, and hope to hear from you guys in the future. Thanks.
All right. Yes. All right, so we are going to call it a day here. You folks know where to find us. I'm going to invite everybody again. Check out Kaizen Tees, kaizentees.com. Get some of our new merchandise there. I'm wearing my UX is not UI t-shirt right now. UX not equal to UI technically. And I get a lot of compliments on this stuff, but man, talk about put it on and go. I saw years ago, I saw The Fly, little weird parting note, but I saw that movie and how he wore the same thing every day. This Einstein did that. I've got a slew of these t-shirts in my closet. Just grab and go. And you make it simple so it's comfortable and I'm getting the message out at the same time. That's what I do. So invite other people to do the same. We've got everything out there. T-shirts, caps, bento boxes, coffee mugs, you name it. And so, check it out. I got to give the plug for that before we wrap up. But thanks everybody again for taking the time to join us on the day. Thanks again to our guests. Yan, loved having you on. We got to do this again. We got to get you when we get a panel of people on, so we get all that energy going too. But until next time, folks, that is all the time we have for today. Until next week, this is Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX, signing off. Till next time, happy UXing, everybody.